If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Well, I don't know when you guys are going to be listening to us, but it's the week after Thanksgiving, and Kristen and I are here in our wonderful little warm, cozy studio, and it's kind of cold outside, isn't it?
It is.
And driving over here, I was just thinking how grateful I am to be able to have this kind of an experience. You know, I mean, we have the best thing going on. It's a beautiful day outside, clear sky, even though Pilot Mountain is burning still.
The sky is burning.
Okay, yeah. So hopefully it's been very dry here in our North Carolina Piedmont, but it sure has been beautiful days, and autumn leaves are falling, and it's pretty. And so I'm just feeling great today. How about you?
Yeah, I've got a lot of gratitude right now, too, for this experience, the podcast, all you listeners, the sunshine, and, you know, being in full holiday mode.
Yeah, well, so speaking of holiday mode, in my business, 360 Health, where we work with people to create healthy lives, this is sugar season. We started with Halloween. Feasting is going on. It was going to continue through the holidays because there'll be lots of gatherings and more meals full of rich ingredients, and then we'll get to New Year's and cap the whole thing off. And then everybody's going to go, oh, I've just gained 200 pounds. What am I going to do? So we are reading a book that I have been waiting to talk about. It's The Secret Life of Fat, the science behind the body's least understood organ and what it means for you. It's by Sylvia Tara. She's a PhD in biochemistry. So this is, another scientific approach to topics, and I love that stuff. How are you reacting to this?
I enjoyed it, but I can't imagine how much it made you happy, Eleanor.
Oh, gosh, yes. I was down in the noogies with her thinking, oh, I believe her.
Because when I first sat down with you to talk about a potential book club, You were like, I want to write a book about fat.
Yes, I did.
So cool. So I just thought of you the whole time I was reading this.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I sort of feel like maybe she stole my book, but I'm not sure. I might still have my book in me. But the thing that
I have plenty. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have plenty to donate.
Fat?
for your
Oh, we're going to explore
research.
We're going to explore that with you. I already took issue with her to start with because she says that it's an organ, that fat's an organ. Mm-hmm. And where I was coming from is it's a system. It is really, when we teach anatomy and physiology, we look at body systems is one way to do that. Or you can do it regionally. But when you're looking at systems, this one, fat gets relegated into the connective tissue as, the way you're going to explore it as a student. And when you really take advantage of all the research we've had in the last 20 years, we're learning it's more than just a single organ like a liver. I mean, it's connected all through your body, your brain, your bones, your immune system, your visceral fat, your subcutaneous fat, the orbital fat, the fat in your joints. It's not an organ. To me, it's a system. So I will give her that I can accept her organ discussion because I think that's okay.
Sure.
But I'm going to take it to the next level. Well, so wait, everybody.
And nonetheless, I mean, she does reveal, fat doesn't have to be demonized, and reveals all the cool things that fat actually does that, like you said, research has unveiled over time, and we're still learning more.
Yeah. Well, she wrote this book and published it in 2017, so it's somewhat recent, mm-hmm. and it's with the publishing house Norton. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Isn't that your family?
No relation, though.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Independent publisher since 1923. So this has been through a pretty good review process, has a great bibliography, wonderful structure to the book, and she's very readable. And I think she gets that from some of her other experience. She has an MBA as well as this PhD, and her MBA is from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, which is a very prestigious school of business. She's a consultant with McKinsey and Company and has worked at the world's largest biotech companies, and she lives in Los Angeles. And she starts off talking about skinny jeans and her experience growing up. And her first diet was when she was 12 years old.
It definitely shows the problem that, it unveils fat bias.
Oh,
and
yes.
she went to fat camp and she struggled with weight. And I just feel for her and know so many can relate to her struggles.
Yeah, and she does dip into the history of what people have thought about fat over the years, which I found is one of the things I would like to do in my book, too. We've changed our whole ideas about what it means to be fat. It used to be, like a sign of affluence, a sign of success. There was a fat men's club in New York, and you had to be stout. See, Tim, you would have been right ready for this.
See, the idea was that, if you had money, you could afford to eat more and be plump.
Yeah, and doctors actually wanted you to be fat.
Yes.
And that's not always true now. Because I have no money, and yet I am plump.
Well, we're talking about
pleasantly plump.
Oh, and we're going to talk about that as well. How that can happen too.
We're talking about post-Civil War, where we were in a bit of a slump, and the people that could afford to eat better were in this fat man's club.
Yeah. But around the 1920s, they shut them down, right?
Yes.
Somewhere in that window. Yeah, but
the economy turned around, and then fat was no longer something that just some people could get.
Yeah. But even back earlier with Rubens and Raphael is the artist, I think, painted the Rubenesque figures. The chubby ladies, and very, very pretty.
Well, because it was a cushion.
Oh yeah.
Against starvation.
Oh yeah.
And something to be, like you said, doctors would recommend it, something that was sought after, and then all of a sudden
we don't.
We don't.
Which is one of the things in all these books that we've been reading that do kind of get into the political nature of things. They talk about the change of attitudes in our professional groups. How we reverse ourselves.
Oh, right.
And that's something that causes people who are not in the scientific arena to say, well, then science doesn't work. But one of the things about science is we're continually learning, and we change our opinions because of the new information that we're gathering. And so it's a fluid thing, and there are always skeptics in the conversation, as well as those that are, fighting for the status quo. This is what we believe. This is the way it works. You can't change my mind.
Well, and this book and the others that we have read, they shine light on the researchers who find something new, and they stand up against people who are fighting for that status quo, even though their research is legit. And it just takes so long for people to grab onto it and realize.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about some of them as we go on. But you said something about politics, and I wrote down here that once the economy got better, it was then known getting fat was seen as unpatriotic, and business leaders wanted lean and efficient bodies to be workers. And so then in 1918, counting calories was an active form of patriotism.
Oh, yeah, but we didn't discover the calorie until around that time, right? We didn't know what it was. And it's the amount of energy required to raise the degree of a gram of water 1 degree, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that the definition of a calorie? It says on page 4 that says, make sure I get that right. Yeah, it was the Fat Man's Club. It says the calorie was defined in the 1800s as the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water, 1 degree Celsius. And we didn't have calorie counting before then.
We didn't.
Yeah. And now it's out of vogue too, isn't it? Calorie counting. Or is it back in vogue?
It depends.
Yeah.
And then you just have the whole dieting craze go from there. The first book was about how to count calories, and then other companies caught on, like Lucky Strike, wanting you to grab a Lucky instead of a Sweet.
Mm-hmm. So let's smoke, huh?
Yeah.
That worked.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, appetite suppressant.
Yeah.
Yeah, lung cancer, but it's okay.
It's so crazy that we went from like loving fat to completely demonizing it and turning it into something that, smoking is better.
Yeah. But we didn't know about smoking either.
We didn't.
Yeah, you see, and that's what I'm saying. As we get more information, then you can reassess the hypotheses that you got, and you may refine them or change them or reject them.
That's right.
And that's the whole process of. So it's. I guess that's what I'm saying. Science is a process. It's not a definitive end. It's the best explanation we have of things with the information we have at the current time.
At the current time, and we're always gathering new information.
Yeah. And so. Right now, they're telling us we have $44.7 billion budgeted for Homeland Security. That's $44 billion, but we're spending $60 billion to fight fat.
Oh,
yeah. And one of the first things she comes up with in her book, which is dedicated to her parents, which is an interesting thing too, is something else besides eating right and exercising is going on, and we're not all created equal. Our bodies are not responding uniformly to fat.
yes.
Which is a liberating.
Here
Yes.
To elaborate on that, she says, clearly we do not understand the enemy we are fighting.
With that 60 billion.
Metabolism is far more complicated than simple arithmetic of calories in and calories out. We are an intricate system of biology, hormones, genetics, and bacteria processing nutrients individually. So yeah, that stood out to me as well.
And yet we all watch mass media and, the print media and particularly for women, what it means to look good. And that is not a large body usually, although it's changing. And this is something that we're watching. We're seeing large size models now get as much play as the skinny models.
Yes, I hope body diversity continues to grow and stay around because, as she points out,
it's supported by this.
Every body is different, and if we all ate the same exact thing, we're still going to look very different.
Right, and because our body's going to do different things, but also our bodies might be healthy as a large body, depending on where our fat is stored.
Yes, I loved that.
I did too.
chapter.
So that it really changes the whole idea that if I see a heavy person, I'm going to say, well, they're unhealthy. And that's not necessarily true. Have you seen these yoga big bodies that are doing yoga and bending and twisting? And it's a marvelous thing, and they're healthy. It's great.
Yeah.
But this judgment that's come into the society because of this mass marketing, because we're selling products and we're selling, an economy based on this. We want everybody to buy our stuff, so we have to make you feel bad, and you give us your money so you'll feel better.
I kind of wish I knew that this is what we were talking about. I would have worn my T-shirt. I have a T-shirt that says, "If fat means flavor, then I'm frickin' delicious."
Tim, I love you. Love you.
But I think that's what's cool is that kind of guilt and struggle with her weight is what drove Sylvia to write this book and to do all the research. And through that exploration of the science, she learned to stop blaming herself for the weight struggles and taking on that shame that came with, doing this fad diet or doing that and it's not working and why am I? And then people point the finger like, you're lazy, you're not doing it right, or try this, do that. And she's like, I've tried everything. You don't understand.
Yeah.
And now by the end of the book, she's like, I'm liberated from that because I know exactly, what my fat is doing and the good and the stubborn part of it and all that. So I thought that was cool to just kind of see her liberating journey there.
Yeah, and I think anybody that is struggling with this idea of, what should my body be, this is a really important book because it'll give you insight in a way that you won't find too many other places.
Yeah.
So, and I like this a lot. Some earlier with this weight loss management, they were giving people pills that had tapeworms in them. And they would eat the let the tapeworm take the nutrients, and then they would give you chemicals to kill the tapeworms. That's pretty extreme.
It's so sad.
And the other thing they were doing was giving them a derivative from explosives, this DNP, which was supposed to help your body fat. I mean, by heating it up. And, oh, man, the toxicity of that was awful.
It caused deaths and terrible blindness.
And so people are desperate. I mean, they are desperate. And, now I kind of feel like bariatric surgery is an extreme. to go and cut a stomach and reform the interior of your body. I'm hesitant on that one, although it is discussed in here. So let's dig around a little bit more in here.
Maybe we could share our top favorite takeaways about what our listeners can learn about fat.
Yeah, and one of the techniques she uses, and many authors do this, and I think it helps pull the reader into their subject, is to give stories.
Lots of stories.
Yeah, and so you in this book, you'll meet a girl named Christina who is the girl with no fat, and you'll meet Jocelyn Rees, who has too much of a type of fat, and she dies at age 3, but she only weighs 6 pounds. Can you imagine 6 pounds and 3 years old? Mm. And you'll meet Randy, who gets a virus, and that affects his metabolism. There are just so many. And Layla, Layla is ravenous. Her appetite is just out of control. So if you like to be drawn into the topic with an example, and then you get some foundational information, and then she brings it back to the story and helps you understand how that information helps this patient. It's really a fun story.
It is fun to read it and makes it...
You feel good. Like, oh, yes, you helped this person.
Right. And as well as it doesn't... The sciencey part isn't overwhelming, and even when she goes into a research article or whatever, she'll explain it in a way that makes sense and kind of go into the background of it rather than just the numbers or the nitty gritty. I appreciated that.
Yeah, well, I love that nitty gritty stuff. So she does have a little foundational chapter in here and gives you the chemical formulas of triglycerides and fatty acids and glycerols and storage molecules for energy. But the one thing that I really want to put out here as we go on is if you don't know anything about fat, in your body, it comes in forms. There's like a yellow or white fat, a brown fat, and a beige fat. And this beige fat and brown fat are the things that are really opening up doors for us to figure out how can we help people manage themselves.
Because they act differently.
Yes, they do. And you'll find them in different places. And I remember when I was teaching, we didn't know much about, like I said, it was part of the connective tissue discussion. And, there are these cells that don't have much in them except a whole big old lipid droplet, and that's all they do. And they're in these packages, and you'll find them in certain places. And if you have a lot of lipids, the cells are going to swell up, and then they're going to shrink when you use it. That's about it, And yet when you're an embryo and an infant, you have a lot of this stuff called brown fat, and it's deposited in certain areas. And then after your first few months, it kind of atrophies and goes away. And that's the last time you talk about brown fat when you're talking about adult physiology. Now we're saying, we need to go back and look at this topic. And so I found that very, very wonderful. Also, she has this PhD in biochemistry, but then went to business. And she did this because she didn't have a burning question as a PhD person. And so her mentors said, well, then don't go into research. If you don't have any questions, don't do it. She said, okay, I'll go into business. But then with her personal journey, she found her burning question of, what is going on with this fat? And that brought her back to her research. And this idea of there's something new here to learn.
Well, maybe it's the business degree that helps her to kind of put it in the story format and make it so easy to understand. I like how she compares metabolism, or the way that the order that we use our food for energy. She compares it to currency. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and the role of the central bank.
Yeah,
If fat's the central bank.
That.
Yeah, I do.
So when you think of currency, you've got cash that you have ready to spend right away.
Yeah, immediately.
It's immediate access. Then you have your checking account that's nearby and ready to use, easy to get to. And then you have your certificate of deposit. Not easy to get to, but it can hold a lot of energy in reserve. So when you compare this to the energy, so we eat our food and it turns to glucose, and that's the cash. So we spend that energy right away.
You break up those carbohydrates and you get this flood of glucose.
Right.
Ready to be spent, whether you need it or not. It's there.
Need it or not. So the extra will go into the checking account, which is the glycogen. And so the storage form of glucose that can be easily brought back out and used when needed.
And, our muscles have a huge amount of that.
Yes.
And our liver has some. But the muscles, need it, because if you have to say, I got to move, it's got to be there in that muscle cell ready to go.
That's right. It's our muscle's favorite.
Yeah, and your bloodstream has some of it in there. Maybe 10 minutes worth in your bloodstream and maybe 45 minutes in your muscles.
Oh, I didn't know the minutes.
Yeah, and then you tap. That's because when you're exercising, if you're going to do endurance exercising, you're going to tap out that glycogen. Well, the glucose first, because that'll give you the initiation. Of I'm going to exercise. I got the energy to do it. You burn that out, tap into that glycogen storage, and you're about 45 minutes in. You need to replenish an hour in something, and that's why if you're running, you're going to probably hydrate with something that's got some calories in it.
So when that glycogen runs out,
oh yeah, and if you don't
replenish it, then you can tap into that certificate of deposit.
There you go.
And that's the fat that has been stored from, you've got your glucose, then what you don't need goes into your checking account as glycogen, and then extra goes into fat. And that fat is not as it's not as readily available.
No. Yeah, and you can also break down protein. There's some conversation about what are you going to tap into first? So is it going to be the fat or the protein?
And diet can affect
the signaling.
Well.
Signaling can do that. Yeah. Yeah, that was great, and I think that's really easy to grasp. Cash, checking, and certificate of deposits.
That's right.
It sounds more like, instead of a certificate of deposit, more like an overdraft protection.
Oh, maybe. But you got to have that stored somewhere.
Yeah. And it can hold a lot of energy. That's why, it was once something that people were proud of. I've got this extra cushion of energy if I run out of food. But in this environment, we don't have that issue.
Yeah, and then she says, beyond the banking concept, we move into the idea that fat can talk.
Yeah, I did not appreciate the titles of that, but I thought you might, Eleanor, how she was.
Well, I'm sort of thinking,
talk and listen. And
if you're enjoying this conversation, maybe we could stop now, because I think we've kind of got our listeners going around 20 minutes or so, and they may have other things to do. So you want to pick this back up?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Eleanor Russell, 360 Health, making healthy happen. If you're interested in talking to me about any of the product support I can give you or encouragement, please contact me at 360health4u.com.
And I'm Kristen Norton with Well Balanced Nutrition. Come visit us at wellbalancednutrition.com. Sign up for a free clarity call where you can see if one-on-one coaching is right for you. And we'll see you next time.
Views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.